We're joined for this conversation by Steve Grumbine. He's founder and CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action. He hosts the podcast Macro and Cheese, and he's an evangelist for modern monetary theory. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So everybody had merch ready to go when this verdict dropped. Trump immediately began fundraising on it. Hillary Clinton released mugs with her face on them, which I think you should call smugs. Because it's just her face and, you know, whatever, something about her being right gloating all along. You can go get them on her Instagram if you want.
No, thank you.
The political question is what this will do to Donald Trump's support. And as John and I were just saying, there are a group of people who will not care about his crimes and will vote for him anyway. There's a group of people who think the trial was a farce and was politically motivated and will be more motivated to vote for him. And there probably is a group of people who are tired of living in interesting times and who I would predict are not going to go to Joe Biden, but who will just stay home. And so I wonder if you think this is going to have any impact at all, honestly, on Donald Trump's political support.
Not really. I think the people that are all in for Trump are all in for Trump. I think that, you know, what's interesting, and I despise Donald Trump, so this is not coming from a place of love. But when you think about it, I mean, Reagan didn't do time for Iran-Contra. Bush didn't do time for WMD. Barack Obama didn't do time for his war crimes. Hillary Clinton didn't do time for Libya. Biden appears to be skating free with genocide on his watch.
But none of those messed around with figures for an amount of $130,000, Steve.
You know, I mean, in the end, it's like, you know, it really is kind of mask off, right? And to me, you know, one of the challenging things, whether, you know, the good news is there was a jury, I assume, you know, so, you know, I say that tongue in cheek, but the reality is that, you know, there is that appearance. You know, you've got people that are tied to the Biden administration that were involved in this case. It's kind of hard to make it not look political. So there's people who already, you know, despise Genocide Joe. Oh, did I say that out loud? Who don't like him and who don't like, you know, the Democratic Party are going to vote for Trump no matter what. And, you know, we don't have a law that says he can't run from prison. I mean, Debs ran from prison. So there's no legal precedent that would prevent him from this. If he's even in prison, right? If his appeals process or whatever other process he goes through doesn't somehow or another overturn this entire verdict. And I suppose in an era where we're always looking to fight for the little guy, it's hard to consider Trump the little guy here, but I can see a certain segment of the population doubling down on this. I can see the people who were already in the tank for Trump doubling down on this. And I can even see some people who weirdly, kind of like the whole falling in love with a serial killer kind of thing. I could see another group of people who just see, you know, political nonsense going on here since the girl with the blue dress didn't get Bubba in jail. That, you know, why should we do that? I could see that. I think that this whole process, though, quite frankly, benefits the incumbent simply because the incumbent is the safe bet and everybody already knows the devil that they got. And there's still a bit of a fear, you know, of what a second Trump presidency with nothing to lose might entail. I mean, he's gone through impeachment, he's gone through felonies, et cetera. You know, what else couldn't he get through, right? I mean, that is kind of, you know, I think that that's a real thing.
I think that my sense, and I think John and I kind of thought, if this has any impact, it depresses turnout. I mean, I agree. I think there will be some people who are a little extra fired up. But
they would have turned out for Trump anyway.
Probably would have. And so then who benefits from a really low turnout election?
It's got to be the incumbent. Right? I mean, it's got to be the incumbent. You know, it's interesting. You know, it kind of, you know, all these polycrises happening at one time. You've got, the ICC going after Netanyahu. You got Biden saying we're going to take the Hague. I'm just being facetious a little bit, but the bottom line is you've got all this going on right now. You've got Ukraine literally taking, action within Russia now, where you got nuclear reactors and other things. I mean, we've got real hardcore geopolitical insanity happening right now. And lo and behold, we have a Trump verdict right on the heels of that. I'm not too conspiratorial, but it doesn't take much to see that's kind of a strange timing of it all. So I could see this definitely taking eyes off of the Biden genocide and the funding and all the other mishaps. And I could see, the potential for even Biden supporters to feel like, oh, we finally got, the orange man. And, maybe even they don't go to vote. Maybe they figure it's safe now. And so, there's a little bit of a wild card there, in my opinion, because, when they don't feel that pressure from the other side, they go back to sleep. So it'll be interesting.
John concluded probably still Trump benefits from low turnout. So we'll see.
I think so, because I think his base is more committed and more energized than Biden's is.
Yeah. Unless Biden's gets the energy, you know what I mean? Unless you get the Biden people who are like, oh my God, a felon.
Yeah.
Well, we could never have that. I think it's a shame that Donald Trump has the potential to be in such good company in, running from prison as Eugene Debs.
I know. That kind of breaks my heart because Eugene Debs is a hero of mine.
I know. Donald Trump does not deserve that. Yeah. I want to talk about this Bloomberg story. Well, it's not just Bloomberg. It's Bloomberg, it's Axios, it's Politico. The headline of the last 30 hours is that billionaires are rushing back to Trump.
They are.
Wall Street is behind Trump. This Bloomberg story in particular talks about a meeting held by a bunch of Wall Street types at a fancy hotel a couple weeks before the verdict, in which they decided that a conviction meant nothing to them compared to Donald Trump's promises of lower taxes and deregulation. So even some of the big financiers who dropped Trump after January 6th and have kept their distance for the past couple of years are coming back to the fold and are coming back to the fold publicly. The head of Blackstone, the head of 1789 Capital gets a mention. Bill Ackman, head of Pershing Square Capital, are all those in Trump's camp or leaning toward it. Widow of Sheldon Adelson, Miriam Adelson, the casino billionaire. She's back, giving tons of money to a Trump super PAC.
Tons of money.
Yeah. I mean, all kinds of people. I also learned, John and I were, our eyebrows were going crazy at this. Scott Bessent, the former Soros Fund Management Chief Investment Officer, who is among those seen in the running to be Trump's Treasury Secretary, said he was personally disappointed by the verdict, but doesn't think it'll matter in November. So a Soros Fund Management CIO is maybe going to be the Treasury Secretary for Donald Trump. If, if you're one of those people who say left and right doesn't really matter anymore, this is right up your alley. Right now, it is billionaires who are getting a lot of scrutiny. And everyone is look at all these billionaires who are lining up behind Donald Trump. But I think if Trump wins, the story is going to be about how he was carried back to the White House on the backs of a bunch of disgruntled losers, right? A bunch of dumb hicks who just want chaos, a bunch of racists who want to deport immigrants, a bunch of bitter men who resent social change and hate women. And of course, those people are going to be part of Trump's coalition. Mm-hmm. But are we going to pretend that those people who are probably, who knows, making between $25,000 and $150,000 a year and have one vote and are probably not donating to the campaign, that it's going to be their impact that carries him back to the White House, or it's going to be the billionaires who are donating to his campaign and donating to these super PACs? And so I wonder if you think this mainstream attention to who the billionaires are backing is going to remain, and whether we're going to see any sort of analysis of the class solidarity represented by Blackstone and Soros linking hands.
You know what? I mean, you figure that everybody should be focused on billionaires and what they do with their money and where they put their attention,
Yes.
So for me, this is just part and parcel with the normal worldview I have. But, we also have another weird factor here, right? Think about this. I mean, people like literally defend people like Taylor Swift and others who are billionaires.
Mm.
And they fancy these people to be heroes. And there's a weird worship of wealth in this country. So while there's a certain segment of the population that will focus on that, there's another part of the population, the Ayn Rand libertarian strain, that celebrates these people as gods of, they did great. Look, otherwise they wouldn't have done so well. So I don't think that it has this. I think it has normal impact. The people that are focused on billionaires and don't like, this extreme wealth inequality are going to see this and say, hey, I think that political folks like Clinton and others will try to make it about the quote unquote deplorables and the rednecks and the hicks and the racists and this, that, and the other. But it hides the very real nature of this country, which is a country founded for and by the wealthy white landowners. And all the rules and laws that govern in between have been there to protect them. And both political parties are capitalist parties that defend wealth at the expense of the working class. There's no good guys here. And so different types of bad guys involved for sure, but no good guys. So I don't think that this really moves the needle one way or the other.
Yeah.
I really don't. I don't see how, like, anybody that considers themselves remotely a lefty is already locked in on the obscene wealth and the obscene control that billionaires have on our political process.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to suddenly say, oh, well, I'm on board. So I don't know. I don't think it changes anything. I think it's a zero-sum game.
It just feels like, initially when I saw the story in Bloomberg, I was thinking, honestly, I mean, I don't share any politics with Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. But I do think they, at least, their point of focus is actually American power.
Right.
And all of this stuff that I don't know, I have been thinking quite a lot lately about, like, who actually makes decisions, who is actually in control of this country, and who the media scrutinizes. And the answers to those two questions are very different, unless you are talking about, I guess, sometimes Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal. And of course, they're not necessarily covering them critically, but at least they are paying attention. I have been thinking quite a lot about the mainstream media's focus on almost anything else but who actually wields power and influence in this country when you really get down to it in ways that make you start to sound like a crank. I mean, you mentioned that Joe Biden has a different batch of the extremely wealthy in Hollywood. And again, not to belabor the point, but I do feel like when it is Wall Street financiers who are behind Donald Trump in this instance, this is not very good, and this is not very American. And what about regular working class people? And this sounds very skeevy because we don't like Donald Trump. When it's a bunch of when it is the Soros Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, right, and a bunch of multimillionaires from Hollywood, and studio executives, and whatever. Well, these are just people who are trying to save democracy, and it's not really presented as across the board undemocratic. I also have to say, like, again, maybe I am a little bit too soft on the quote unquote basket of deplorables that support Trump. Like, there's some real nasty types in there.
Yeah.
But those are people those are individuals who live in this country who we are going to have to work with no matter what.
That's right.
In whatever plan we have for shaping this country.
Just as equal as ours.
Yeah. Those are people we are going to have to find a way to either work with or work around. But we don't have to find a way to work with billionaires because there shouldn't be any. You know what I mean? It's that is a category of people you can actually eliminate. Eliminate not in a physical blood and guts sense.
No.
But a category of wealth, that you can eliminate. And I do think like that it is worth more focus than, the unfortunate fact that there are jerks among us, you know?
Mhm.
Yes. I'm going to quote my guy, Frank Zappa, see if this resonates. The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable, continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater.
Yeah.
That, my friends, is what I believe we've got here. You've got wealth that has nothing to do with you and I, and it's factions of wealth. And these oligarchs pool their resources, pool their attentions toward the things that they care about, none of which has anything to do with you and I, other than our labor and whatever, and our ability to purchase goods and services to fatten their wallets. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they don't care about us. And they are the ones that ultimately control the purse strings, control the elections, control the direction. Think about this. If we had any real control over the situation as people, regular people within this system, you would have seen Joe Biden immediately stop funding genocide to Israel. Immediately. There would have been no question because his poll numbers have been tanking because of this issue. People have been lining up in the streets. People have been showing up on campuses. Even that has had zero impact on the Biden administration whatsoever. In fact, Donald Trump even went so far as to say he'd go even further. Okay. So when you start thinking about democracy and you place a high level of, stock in the process and the outcomes, I think we're fundamentally missing the point that this isn't oligarchy. Princeton study in 2010 showed that our opinions matter not, that we have no real agency, no real power within the system, that the power elite have all that power because ultimately it's Noam Chomsky said it himself. It's all about manufacturing consent. It's all about getting us to buy into their theatrical narrative so that we go along with whatever it is. And as you say, the issues that they're fighting for, you sit back and you say, wait a minute, none of this makes sense to me. I don't even know what you're talking about. This isn't even relevant to my life. But yet they make it something that you feel you need to fight to the end for. You must fight this thing. And so the only things that really work in public anymore, because they don't talk about the economic narrative because they're both capitalists, is identity politics. And that's why the things that you brought up about the racists, the deplorables of this, that, the other, is the real dividing line amongst the proles. Because otherwise, none of the things that they're talking about. I have no idea why it's in my interest that we slaughter the people of Gaza. I can't for the life of me figure it out. I can't for the life of me figure out why it's in my best interest that we fund Ukraine to go into Russia to destabilize them. I don't know why that's in my interest. I have no idea why it's in my interest for us to go around, screw around with Taiwan, with China. I have no idea why it's in our interest to do any of those things. But yet those are the things that they're doing. So it's somebody's interest. It's just not ours.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with understanding how the outcomes of these things, other than the fact that the racists and the hateful, the women haters and all that stuff, suddenly are the ones that have the bully pulpit to advance their punitive social order. Other than that, I just don't see it. And I struggle with this every time I get called in to do political commentary because, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, Joe Biden wasn't lying when he talked to Wall Street previously. Nothing will fundamentally change.
Yeah.
And you look at Trump and he's telling them, hey, nothing will really fundamentally change, but I'll take it another step further. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this Project 25 stuff shoveling around everywhere. Everybody, oh, my God, Project 25, did you see it? And I find it fascinating that the right wing always has a positive, affirmative agenda for what kind of evil they're going to try to pull off. And the left wing, if you will, I hate calling the Democrats the left wing because they're not the left wing. But they suddenly are like, oh, my God, we got to react to Project 25. Not we have to have our own agenda. We have to react to Project 25 because they're always at one step ahead. So it's always this game of we can't do anything for you. All we can do is stop them. And so this narrative is serving someone. It isn't the working class. It's these billionaires. So at the end of the day, we're distracted, we're distraught, we're freaked out, we're watching genocides occur on the daily, and we're feeling like we're saving democracy playing this game. But in reality, it's not. It's the oligarch Olympics.
Yeah.
And they're using us as pawns in a game of thrones between themselves. And I think that, we talk about it. A lot of us talk about it in different forums. But when it comes time for elections, we sometimes have a bit of an amnesia about this. And we go back into legitimizing what I consider to be an illegitimate attempt at further manufacturing consent for these oligarch interests. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Hey, you know what? I'm as right as the guy is behind the curtain. I don't know. But all evidence that I have seen without getting too cuckoo down suggests that none of what we're talking about here has any impact on the main street at all, other than the social issues, because none of them are talking about any kind of meaningful economic issues.
Before we let you go, Steve, let me ask you to paint an economic picture for us based on some news from the last 2 days. We have yesterday's revised figures for first quarter GDP growth. Turns out GDP rose a little less than they had anticipated at first, 1.3% year on year, not the 1.6% estimated. Consumer spending grew by 2%, not the 2.5% estimated. And then today we have data from the core personal consumption expenditures price index, which is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, saying that measure of inflation rose by 0.2% month on month and 2.8% year on year. Services inflation grew by slightly more month on month. Consumer spending fell a tiny bit, and wage growth slowed to its slowest pace in 5 months, 0.2%. Real disposable income dropped for the second time in 3 months. For a Federal Reserve that wants to cut interest rates, you have to think this is all pretty good news. What does it say to you?
Well, first things first, I think they get the whole interest rate thing backwards. Interest rates are a tool of providing people that already have money, that have investments, more money. Okay. So I believe that ultimately what you've seen is a huge pump of brand new, fresh dollars into the system through the interest income channel. And I believe that the fattening of the wealthy has already occurred. And now to maintain any semblance of order, they've got to try to back that down some, because in keeping those interest rates high continues to exacerbate the wealth gap to the point where it's absurd, to the point where the manufacturing of consent can't be managed. You know what I mean? Like we're at a point, and the idea that somehow or another raising interest rates tamped down on demand is ludicrous. You see that's not the case. You see that demand kept going, minor blips of demand change. So the whole point of interest rate hikes was sold to us that it was going to slow our spending, thus depress the job market, create layoffs, create the conditions to bring down inflation. What it's really done is just funneled massive amounts of money to the wealthy. And what you're dealing with now is the absurdity of that inequality. So quite frankly, them trying to quote unquote cut rates, I mean, it always cracks me up when people talk like interest rates are like this thing that, is going to somehow or another, stop inflation. It literally is the thing that creates inflation by increasing the cost of credit, et cetera. And I think they realize that maybe after a little bit, that people will stop buying because I know my disposable income has dropped significantly. I know that my ability, just anecdotally, to do various things has considerably dropped. Mm-hmm. So you're going into the get ready for the Christmas season. You're starting the summer month of vacations and so forth. They want people to spend their money on vacation. They want people to spend their money at the Christmas time. They want to ensure that people are out there trying to buy houses and stuff like that. So it makes sense that from that standpoint, they would try to lower interest rates. But again, like I said, I don't think you've seen any change in demand, no real change in demand. It's pretty much stayed status quo, except the rich have gotten richer.
Is that always the case? Steve Grumbine.
Yes, it is.
As always, we appreciate your time so much. Where should our listeners go to find Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action, Macro and Cheese, and all your other work?
All that, yes. Please go to our website, realprogressives.org. Also, check out our Substack, realprogressives.substack.com. Also, I release a podcast every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. You can catch it on any podcast platform, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. Well, that's the same, Apple and iTunes, right? Anyway, Spotify, SoundCloud, you name it. And you can catch me over there, usually on Tuesday nights over at Status Quo with Jordan.
Thanks so much, Steve. Really appreciate it.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.